for the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we are going to try to address some of the questions you have submitted through the question control panel. The way we will organize it is that I will ask each speaker a few questions, and then we have questions that are more general for all speakers. So for the first 10 minutes, I will ask questions to each speaker, and I will ask them to reply, I mean, of course, as briefly as possible, so we stay in schedule. I will start with questions related to the first presentation from Hilde, and a question on the role, the NBS Type 3 and the role of citizenship and civil society in adaptation to climate change.
So indeed, I think citizens can play a strong role when it comes to implementing Type 3. I mean, for example, it could be that citizens are involved in greening the city and making the environment greener. I think the involvement of citizens in that context is even crucial for its success, because as we explained in the various presentations, the more stakeholders you involve, whether these are citizens or whether these are policymakers or whether these are researchers or whoever, I think the higher the chances of success, the more easy it will be to really give all the benefits to all the different stakeholders in a fair and equitable way. So I think, yes, they play a great role.
Okay, thanks, Hilde. I have actually a couple of questions that are related to our poll. The fact that it's still not really clear the relationship between the NBS concept and some other concepts like the ecosystem-based adaptation or the ecosystem approach. So can you give us some feedback on that?
So as it has been said during the presentations, what we actually see as nature-based solutions, it can be seen in a way as some kind of an umbrella concept that encompasses existing concepts, that builds on existing concepts. But each of these concepts can have its own specificities. It can be a specific type of nature-based solution. For example, you can have a green infrastructure, which would be more like a Type 3. But definitely ecosystem-based adaptation would also fall under the umbrella of nature-based solutions, as long as all the criteria that we see are fulfilled for the nature-based solution.
That's actually a good point you just raised, because I had a question on the difference between nature-based solutions and green infrastructures. So Hilde, or maybe Sophie, you want to answer it? I'm breaking my own rules, but Sophie, do you want to answer on especially the reference to constructed wetlands? Are they nature-based solutions? Are they green?
So I would say, as Hilde just said, it can be considered as an umbrella concept, and that all of there are many ecosystem-based approaches. You have ecosystem-based adaptation, you have green infrastructure, you have natural water retention measures, you have ecosystem-based disaster reduction, and these all tend to address the social, the economic, and the environmental challenges from a distinct perspective, while the nature-based solution concept is a bit more encompassing, more systemic in that sense. And also from our side, from the Commission side, there's a strong emphasis on very much this innovative aspect of implementing these nature-based solutions.
Okay, thanks. I have a last one for Hilde, and then I will switch to Gretchen. So Gretchen, be ready. How to demonstrate economic viability of nature-based solutions? It's a good one, right?
It's a difficult one.
In 10 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So I think we saw it as some kind of a crucial element if you want to convince also, for example, the private sector. But I think what you actually need to convince them is good case studies, and I think that is also what is now also provided by the European Commission, by these big demonstration projects. So I think we have to showcase that it's actually viable on the long term. I also think that besides just demonstration projects, we also need to reinforce the knowledge base. So I think basic research and also investing the tools for evaluation of biodiversity. I think that is still something that is also needed in the context of demonstrating economic viability. And then I think the last thing is just also communication. using platforms like Opla, like Think Nature, to engage many stakeholders, so that actually the word can be spread. I think that is also
going two ways, having more ways to estimate economic viability, and then promoting the concept larger. Okay, thanks a lot. I would like to ask Gretchen a question that has been framed in different of the questions we received. It's related to this landscape scale, and why landscape scale, why not ecosystem scale, especially if you look at local nature-based solutions, green roofs, how do they fit to landscape scale? So Gretchen, could you give us your view on that?
Yeah, so thanks very much for that question. I think that we should not be so focused on if it's landscape scale or ecosystem scale. These are principles that I had posted that are under modification, and I think that they completely can be applied at the at a scale like the ecosystem. I think one of the things we were trying to in developing that part of the principles, it's something that our members were working on, is how do you, we don't want nature-based solutions to be conceived as something that we've been already doing. What makes it different? What is the added value of nature-based solutions? And we do think scale is one of them. So how do you, in your question of green roofs, for example, sometimes internally in our discussions we'll use the example, well, what if there's one green roof in the entire city? Is that a nature-based solution? And I don't think it is. We don't think it is, because it's not connected to anything else. It's not providing a link to wider ecosystem services that can provide a solution to a societal challenge in an urban context, such as reducing the temperature of the urban heat island effect. You need actually, in order to do that, you have to achieve something at a scale which makes the that detectable. So research shows that that this does happen when you have multiple green roofs. And furthermore, how would you connect the green roof system to something, to tramways, to I think they're called tramvers or trembleux? How do you connect that to wetlands within the city, to green spaces, and how does that connect to green spaces outside the city? Because I think what we're talking about are the enabling of larger amounts of ecosystem services to flow to residents in urban areas. So green roofs for us would be one part of it, and they should be connected to other types of nature-based solutions, but at multiple sites, trying to achieve that scale.
Thank you, Gretchen. There was a very specific question on do you know initiatives for urban areas in the Mediterranean area? Do you want to answer very quickly, maybe just mentioning a few of them if you know some, and we will move to some more general question then.
I do know that the IUCN office in Malaga has been working on developing case studies in the Mediterranean context, and I do believe it does include some urban areas. So I can put that person in touch with my colleagues in the Malaga office for more information, but I can't say it's specifically just about cities in the Mediterranean.
Okay. I have a very quick question, but that might trigger more of a longer answer, but maybe keep in mind, and we can address it as a general one. It's a question about the fact that it seems NBS are more urban than rural, that it's a urban thing. So I don't know if you want to answer right now or open the debate afterwards. We have actually another related question, which is NBS in agricultural landscape. Is it feasible with regards to conservation measures? So I don't want if you want to give a quick insight, or we keep that for the discussion among all the speakers.
We can keep it for later, maybe. Others would probably like to contribute to that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would like now to address a few questions directly to Karsten. Karsten, actually, the question on how much time would be required to build this evidence base for nature-based solutions, and if it's too late or not. And the second one is on the linkage between biodiversity, ecosystem function and services, and how it applies to nature-based solutions.
Well, two challenging ones. Thank you very much. I think, well, building the evidence base, I think it's always a little bit challenging of saying, well, we have major problems and we don't have the time to build evidence base. I think from my point as now looking at that as a scientist, I would say that we are building the evidence base continuously, and a major chunk of it is out there. And I think these ideas of well, thinking about what can be learned from existing concepts and existing projects and bringing them together in platforms like OPLA, like Think Nature, and then, for example, us as at Eklipse, helping here and there to further synthesize it and make it available. It's, I think, a continuous process, which of course could yield more, could profit more from having more resources, more people working together, and so on. But this way also of jointly doing practical processes of NBS, but also jointly doing the science. This is just still an area which is slowly developing, and by now further fostering that kind of integrated work, I think will tremendously increase the evidence base. Necessarily, we always have insecurities there and things we don't know, so there will be more research needed. But I think there's a lot of evidence out there which we can use also for nature-based solutions.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, sorry, and the second question about the link between biodiversity ecosystem services, functions, and up to the nature-based solutions. We discussed this a lot when writing our paper. Because we are aware that, as Sophie said, this is an even further reaching umbrella concept, the NBS concept, and it takes us, of course, always a little further away from just looking at the core needs that we have in terms, for example, of biodiversity conservation. And I think there again, there's this issue of honesty and reflection and reflexivity in projects that we think about where are the different goals, where are the trade-offs, where are the conflicts, where are also the win-win situations, which we don't always have, like we said. And I think we have to be very honest there and saying it's not always, like we know that it's not, but just by saving and looking at ecosystem services, we will not automatically save biodiversity. It's the same with nature-based solutions. We will not automatically preserve biodiversity with it. And sometimes we will really have to stick to our old approaches of conservation without thinking of nature-based solutions or something like that to ensure that, for example, we maintain our species and ecosystems. But it's just a multiplicity of options that we provide.
Yeah, it's one more of the potential cards that can be played.
That's a nice picture, yeah.
So I would like to ask a question directly to Sophie. Thank you very much, Karsten. It's related actually to this question about urban-rural. It's linked to the idea of specific instruments to finance nature-based solutions in rural environments and in protected areas. So,
okay, thanks,
Sophie.
So indeed, there has been a very strong focus on nature-based solutions in urban areas within the Horizon 2020 framework program, and that is partially due to the fact that because urban areas are so important also in Europe because of the very high percentage of people living there, of the pressures that the expansion and the urban ecosystems and the expansion of urban areas, the pressure it puts on natural resources, but also on actually the possibilities that are there to develop nature-based solutions and hence really have a very high impact from implementing nature-based solutions there. So it's true there has been a strong focus on urban, but rural has been there. If you look at the 2016-17 work program in Horizon 2020, there were two calls that could have been, at least two calls that could have been relevant for rural. They're now closed, but they were addressing nature-based solutions for hydrometeorological risk reduction, which could include urban, but also definitely rural, because it was important to take very much the landscape or regional scales into account. There was also call on cultural heritage and cultural landscapes, which can also be considered as sort of nature, or developing cultural landscapes could be considered nature-based solutions. So, and in the work program that's coming up, maybe more interesting for you, is that again, the one on forest nature-based solutions for forest fire risk reduction and multi-hazard risk reduction. It's not specific to urban, and there are a few others like more other actions that are taking place, like valuing nature, which is very important for the nature-based solution concept, and which could apply applicable then to both urban and rural areas.
Okay, so it's more a question of timing, that it has started with urban areas and it's in the move to cover more and more environments and potentially more rural.
Right, so the focus has been on urban. The focus will, for the moment, still remain a little bit on urban, but there have been, and there are still also, I forgot, was on the interlinkages between climate, biodiversity, and ecosystem services, and the implementation of nature-based solutions there. There's a request to look at a wide variety of European regions, so that's not only limited to urban again.
Yeah, okay. I don't know, Gretchen, do you want to add something about the fact it's not just urban, it's more start?
Yeah, I think in IUCN we work actually more on the rural aspect than in the urban globally, and so sorry if my presentation may have mischaracterized that, but if I give a good example of one thing that we're working on is how can you use restoration or forest landscape restoration, which has a stakeholder engagement component to it. How can you use that to start meeting societal needs such as food security? And there's a building evidence base for how restoration on farms, specifically on farms, in different countries around the world can start increasing food security at a larger scale, in part through provisioning ecosystem services, increasing pollination services, increasing water retention in soils, things like that. And so part of that is linked to what's been called the Bonn Challenge, where there's a worldwide challenge to countries to restore their lands. And so one of the vehicles to which to do that is through forest landscape restoration, which is occurring largely, almost exclusively outside of urban areas.
Okay, so quite a lot of things also going on the yes. rural areas. I have a totally different question, but of course it's always related. And I would address it to all of you. It's how to ensure embedded in the design of nature-based solution their sustainability. I mean, so that it's not something that just a one shot. I think it's a key question that was raised also at the workshop in December, so I would want to have your views on that. Maybe Carsten, and then Hilde, Sophie, and Gretchen, if you want to. Just raise your hand, Gretchen, if you want to say something. Carsten, do you want to give a bit of a feedback on what had been discussed also in the workshop on this question?
Yeah, as far as I can remember, it's half a year ago, but yeah, I think it was discussed very strongly, sustainability in two respects. First of all, in terms of balancing economic, social, and ecological aspects. But I think sustainability here means basically how can we ensure that there's a longevity of the projects. And I think this is a challenge also that we have been discussing in many projects, even in conservation measures. We have been discussing this for 30 or 40 years. And that's of course an issue where I think that well, governance needs to, and local governments needs to really rethinking the way they are looking at these kind of things. And often they in some areas if they're looking at, for example, grey infrastructure, they look at it from a perspective of 20 to 30 years, and that there needs to be maintenance and so on. And I think there's also a sort of shift in the way we are doing projects which are pro-environment and pro that we also have to be aware that there are, of course, continuous costs to maintain things and to be reflexive and iterative, and when it comes to adaptive management of the solutions, that actually you need to change things. And I think this is a shift in the mindset of many ways we do local or even regional policies. And I think this is, of course, a long way to go, but that's an issue. Same for the research, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Carsten. Sorry, I'm getting questions as you're all speaking. So, Sophie, do you want to add something on this aspect of sustainability?
Yeah, maybe I would like to, as Carsten said, indeed, with nature-based solutions, we're looking very much at balancing the 3 pillars of sustainability. So also in our projects, we want to monitor all of the benefits that come out. So the ecological, the environmental ones, the economic ones, and the social ones. That's one way, balancing these 3. Another way is of ensuring this more sustainable long-term design is by ensuring that these are often bottom-up and locally adapted approaches, and that's very much also our concept of co-designing, co-implementation. If it's done by those people locally, it has much more chance of staying in the long term. Also, multiple stakeholders, not just one considering one interest, but considering the many interests of the people of connected to that. And also, we're, I think, trying to ensure this by investing in research and innovation, social innovation in nature-based solutions. So looking at different types of governance, of financing, innovations that will indeed enable this kind of more long-term visions investment.
I think it's very complete. I was also planning to refer to like more holistic approaches and engaging the different actors bottom up.
Gretchen, you want to add very quickly maybe a concluding remark on this aspect?
Yes. In one of the case studies I referred to, they had a 100-year planning horizon, and that was the managed realignment for MedMary, and they're using ecological engineering principles. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from other disciplines. And so that would be my concluding remark, is what can we learn from other disciplines to have better implementation of nature-based solutions as a whole?
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm getting the questions. Actually, I have a question that's quite not the easiest one. Yeah, it's like 4 or 5 questions in one, and I would like that to be the final discussion. It's related to the reality check with the current political and economic situation. So basically, you have industries relocating into biodiversity rich areas right now. So how do you use NBS to address that kind of issues? You have bioeconomy that is currently developing. So does that involve NBS? How can NBS preserve biodiversity in this context of increasing resources? Have an echo. Maybe Gretchen and Carsten, if you could mute the time I'm speaking so it doesn't echo too much. And in the face of some of the major pressures, like right now the use of resources in the Amazonian region, so can we use nature-based solution in this very difficult context? Is it not just a European type of tool? Can we use it on a larger basis for, I would say, the reality check of the current situation? I know it's not the easiest questions, but maybe if one of you want to start thinking of that.
Well, I think in terms of is the world ready for it? I think indeed in Europe it's clear that Europe is like a pioneer. But then again, if you also look at the whole context of the ICN with you can see that also on a global scale that there are different, I mean, that there are a lot of actors interested in this concept. It goes beyond Europe, definitely. I think it's just a matter of indeed demonstrating and raising awareness about the value of nature-based solutions, raising awareness just already about the concept. So I do think indeed there's a good climb now to get it done through different bodies that are active in the field. Be it actors that are more, I would say, more towards the research side or the policy side, or maybe more towards the implementation side. I think if they all work together, I think there's definitely some potential to get it flying.
Sophie, you want to add something?
Yes, I think we also also believe the rest of the world is definitely ready for this. Indeed, some of the calls I mentioned, especially on restoration of urban ecosystems and water, are actually international. Encourage international cooperation. One more specifically with China, and the other more specifically with select countries, so the Caribbean, Latin American countries. So, and I think it's possible to, because nature-based solutions is a systemic and a reconciling concept. It is possible to actually address some of these more difficult and very complex issues. I don't think it will be easy. It's very much this multi-stakeholder, multi-benefit, multi-interest discussions that are taking place, but I think it is definitely possible, and that's what we're promoting.
Thank you. Maybe Gretchen or Karsten, do you want to? Gretchen, I saw your hand. Do you want to give a quick feedback on that? And also Karsten, I see your hand now. Gretchen.
Okay. Sure. Just quickly, that I think we're still in need of making the business case for nature-based solutions to the private sector, so that what is actually the value for them incorporating ecosystem-based approaches into their business models. And I think one of the disciplines that tries to do that is some of the risk insurance around flood disaster related to flooding. There is an evaluation of what that costs, and there have been a few, not very many, studies that will actually value what an ecosystem. Had it been in place, how would the costs have been reduced? I think we need more studies like that in order to encourage a better uptake of nature-based solutions by private sector and what it means for the economy as a whole.
Thank you, Gretchen. Karsten, you want to?
Yeah, I can nicely add to that, because actually I wanted to reflect a little bit on the bioeconomy question, because I think this goes a little bit further, because bioeconomy is a big idea of, well, making a bigger revenue from nature, roughly speaking. And for example, when we were inviting to our meeting, actually I got one reply: "Oh, wonderful, nature-based solutions! Finally, my genetic modification work gets recognized." So I got really some sort of this feedback. So we need to be careful that, of course, bioeconomy again has a very focused setting, more on the genetic side of things, and I don't think that these two, again, communities, those of us thinking integrated about nature-based solutions, and people thinking especially from a very economic revenue point of view about bioeconomy, they are very much in line yet. So I think this is another way. I think there will be links between them, but I think there's still this gap in thinking between them, which needs to be very carefully adjusted or communicated. Because the bioeconomy has the economy in its name, and I think that's one of the challenges that we have behind that. I think conceptually we're not that far away.
Okay, thanks a lot, Karsten. I think Sophie wanted to add quickly.
Yeah, maybe I just want to very quickly comment on Gretchen's reply, and that indeed we also realize that the business case really still needs to be made, and that's why we're very much focusing on this evidence base. So making sure that the nature-based solutions that are implemented under our projects are monitored for the very different aspects, social, economic, and environmental benefits. And in addition to that, having calls on valuation of biodiversity ecosystem services and enhanced nature-based solutions. It's a very important point.
Thanks a lot, Sophie. Well, I think we are actually reaching the end of this webinar with this final discussion. We are 10 minutes after schedule, but I guess it would have been too short to give just 20 minutes to this discussion. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, you enjoyed the presentation. Everything has been recorded and will be available on both the BiodivERsA and the Eklipse website, so you can also forward this links to your colleagues who couldn't join. And please, if you know some people who stayed stuck at the door of the webinar, apologize from us. We had a technical issue and some people couldn't join us for this discussion and this webinar. I would like to thank a lot our speakers, Hilde Egermont, Sophie van der Hoosten, Gretchen Walters, and Karsten Nessover, and also for bearing with the technical aspect of switching from remote to on-site. And I would like to thank very much all the people who are in the backstage. You haven't seen them, but they have been working very hard. My colleague Pierre and Lise and Heidi, who have been trying to sort out all those questions. What we will do is some of the questions which we couldn't relay here, we will ask maybe some of the speakers to answer directly to some of those questions if they can. So you will get an answer afterwards. The last part, I would like to invite you to give us some evaluation, some feedback on this webinar, because this is very useful for us in terms of putting together something else next time that will maybe even work better, address some of the issues you've encountered. So you will see the evaluation form link is sent to you by the chat. So you should receive it, and you will also receive it by email after this session. Well, I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I hope you will join us for some other Eklipse and BiodivERsA activities. Please keep informed through our website and our mailing list. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you have a nice end of day. Bye-bye.